message of unity, as good as it sounds, is not winning anyone any elections.
I'm Jesse Moss. I'm the co-director of the documentary Boy State.
And my name's Amanda McBain, and I'm the other co-director.
Going into the film, had either of you guys ever gone to Girls or Boys State?
No, we did not know too much about the program. I didn't even know about it growing up in California. We actually both grew up here in California, and didn't actually learn about it until I saw a picture of President Bill Clinton when he was running for president. Then Governor Bill Clinton. He had participated in the program, and there was a famous picture of him shaking John F. Kennedy's hand as a teenage boy, and he was because he participated in this program. I think up until we read about the program and started to make the film, I just assumed it had gone away. But it's actually really popular, and a lot of people do go through it, boys and girls, because the programs are separate.
And every state has one. So Bill Clinton went through in Arkansas, but we obviously filmed in Texas.
And then to follow that, do you guys think it benefited you going into it not have known anything about it?
That's a good question, and no one's ever asked us that question before. I love it. I think that, as a total outsider and kind of just the wow factor of not having your bearings and really just being in full observational mode and seeing every detail. I think also feeling the kind of newness of it because we didn't really know what to expect, really. That was probably made the experience pretty vivid. I kind of maybe would have felt better, I think probably if we had known what to expect. I would have felt more in control. But we managed our way through the chaos and captured, we were there for the moments that mattered. So in the end, I think not having the experience of knowing exactly what we were going to find was okay. It's also true to the nature of the filmmaking that we do that you're prepared to, learn a lot about something you didn't know a lot about.
And then my second question for you guys is, the film itself seemed very intensive, and you seem to follow it from the very beginning to the very end. And so how many cameras did you guys use? And how did you go about the editing process?
That's right. Our technique as filmmakers is cinema verite. It's very immersive. It's very embedded. And we like to kind of really live inside the story. I think that's a really exciting place to be. So we wanted to be there every day of the program for its entire 6 days. It doesn't sound like that much time because we've made films in the past where you filmed for a year and a half, but this was a contained period of time, but it was wild because there were 1,000 kids and we needed a big crew. Usually we work with a really small crew. We love the intimacy of a tiny crew, maybe a crew of one. But for this, to film all these, we needed to follow some boys, more than one. We wanted to follow 4 or 6 boys. And we brought in 6 cinematographers from New York and other places. And we had a crew of 28. So it was like a giant, for us at least, a giant army of collaborators to help us. And it's actually a really terrifying but also exciting way to work with so many collaborators who are also artists, and sort of harness your collective artistic abilities to make art together.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Kind of going off of that, what filmic decisions did you guys make in order to effectively portray the intensities of the American political climate, since it is such a big topic, especially nowadays, but also doing that via a young male demographic?
Well, I'm going to take the first part and you do the second part, the male demo, and I'll do the political part of that. I think just to talk briefly about how, we wanted to make the film because we wanted to have a conversation about our country, its politics, our democracy, its health or its sickness. And we thought Boy State would be a really interesting kind of prism to look at these questions, but without talking about Donald Trump, which we did not want to do. And we're really interested in how young people are kind of forming their own political identities and then becoming political actors. And the boys that we cast in the film we really responded to initially because they were so politically savvy, they were engaged, they were already working in politics, and we loved kind of their sophistication. Not every boy, you don't have to be that knowledgeable about politics to go to Boys State. Now, I think a lot of kids learn a lot there, but these kids just already knew a lot. And in the ways that they talked about the challenges of our country and their own activism, we thought these kids are really interesting. And we were curious to see what would happen when they went through Boys State. Would they run for office? Would they win? Would they lose? How would they confront these difficult decisions about how you campaign? And do you embrace dirty tricks? Do you lie about what you stand for? All that kind of big stuff. So that's kind of out of those decisions of who to cast, I think emerged this kind of more profound political conversation. And then the sort of the boy aspect of it was,
well, they're also the four you see in the film. Their politics are very different. So we knew just even in the conversation between these four people and whoever they were going to interact with there at Boys State was already going to be that space of, can you talk to someone on the other side of any issue? So we knew that we were going to run into some amount of, I mean, polarization is fraught. It's going to be fraught whether it's in Washington or at Boys State. You have some kids coming from, who've never left their town of 4,000 people deep in somewhere, who have not met anybody who's any different from them at all. And similarly, that would be true from someone from somewhere else. So that was going to be an interesting experience for everybody going in. I think we ended up at Texas Boys State because we'd read this article in 2017 about 2017 program, the legislature there voting to secede from the union, right? Which was a totally it was a real acting out moment, and it kind of became a local scandal and got in the news there, and then went into the Washington Post, which is how we read about it. So that's how we ended up there. And I think that we didn't quite think too much in advance about, wow, what's it going to feel like to be in a room of 1,100 boys, but and how interesting and wild a window that would be on boyhood, until we actually got there. And then we saw, this is unlike anywhere we've ever been. And what we saw then in the week going forward was everything from Lord of the Flies, right? Again, something I sort of expected to see, to some, deep levels of emotion and complication. Listening and connection and empathic leadership and all these things I didn't frankly think I just didn't know to expect. And I was very surprised by and moved by. So the boyness of it really, as embodied really in our two main characters, who sort of have one that's, all about he uses words of empathy and listening, and then the other one uses words of war, really, shock and awe, and there's sort of two different versions of being strong and powerful as a male. And I thought that was a really interesting lesson.
What things did you kind of expect from the gentlemen in the program? What did you expect to happen, I guess? And then was there anything in particular that really surprised you?
We did have expectations based on sort of what we thought their strengths were as candidates going into this electoral contest of governor at Boys State. We thought Robert, who's really handsome and just seemed like he would naturally do well and probably be elected governor. We thought Stephen, whose politics were a little more progressive, a little more liberal than most of the boys there, and he's a little bit quieter, shyer. We thought no chance he's going to do well. And I think the great surprise was watching actually Stephen outperform and best Robert in that contest for Nationalist Party governor. That was wonderful to see that actually the boys, not only that Stephen found his voice, but that the boys in that room really supported him and wanted to elect him, wanted to choose him over Robert.
Even once they start talking openly about his support of, the gun issue. So it's not an abstraction. And
we also knew that the boys would behave kind of badly to some degree, that they would do things like vote to ban cargo shorts and vote to send Prius drivers to the state of Oklahoma. what was more surprising was what happened later in the week when they began to actually talk about serious subjects like taxation and gun control, and really actually find some common ground with each other. Because that was the big question of the project, of the film, was like, can anybody agree on anything anymore in America, right? Are we all so worked up and divided that we're sort of on this terrible sort of spiral into some kind of civil war, right? And actually to see at Boys State, which admittedly is not representative of the United States. It's just a bunch of teenage boys in Texas, but it's actually a pretty big group. They actually not only elected surprising leaders, but they found compromise. So that was probably the biggest surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. That hint of empathy and camaraderie between, young men and women as well.
Of unity, you mentioned, but as we see now in our presidential contest, we have one candidate who's sort of talking about unity and one candidate who's sort of preaching division and fear and hatred. And I won't name any names, but I think, we know who. And I think these things were these things were mirrored at Boys State.
It was really incredible to watch, both Renee, but particularly Stephen, like, his ability, there's certain principles he will not compromise on, but then what's the other space, right? You're not going to find common ground with like QAnon or like David Duke, but like who else is out there, and what happens when you get to know them personally, and then have those conversations. That was really very rewarding to watch, and rewarding for him to experience too, because I think he plans to do this for a living. And so to really try this out in a safe and simulated way before he does it for real.
What would you say to aspiring filmmakers who are interested in filming documentaries, like about the process, how to make that final push, especially with filmmakers who really want to delve into deeper topics? Like, how do you respect those topics? How do you make those decisions to do what you need to do?
That's a great question. I love documentary because I think it's really democratic. I think it's really open to everybody. You just need a camera, could be a phone, could be stories that are personal to you, what you care about, because I think when you care about them, you'll find your audience, and your audience will care about them too. And we started out making films for ourselves to learn how to become filmmakers. We used Amanda's camera, and we just kind of learned how to do it. And you don't need to. Film school is really valuable. We've both taken film classes, but I think there's no substitute for just going out and starting to work and building a community of people to help you and support your vision. And I think that we found success in our very first film, and we made it for nothing, and we found an audience for it. We found someone to distribute it, and it didn't seem on the surface like a film that anybody would care about. But I think trusting your voice, what you find interesting, is really important. Don't think about what the audience wants to see or what some buyer wants to see. That's what I would say.